Howdy, folks. Welcome to Democracy in Action. I'm your host, David Cobb. We have a fantastic program for you lined up today here on the Green News Network. We'll be talking to David Kulma, who is running for the United States Congress in a special election in South Carolina. David Kulma, welcome to Democracy in Action.
Great. It's great to be here, David. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. So let's just jump right into it, David. We'd love to actually give you an opportunity because we know the corporate media tends to either ignore or denigrate Greens as a general matter. But I'd like you to take the opportunity in this medium to introduce yourself to the viewers.
Sure. Well, I'm a professional musician. I'm classically trained as an oboist. I had some rehearsals today. And I'm a music teacher at and I'm an adjunct professor at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina, where I live. We've been here.
To say you're an academic sharecropper, the way that.
Yes, exactly. So I am. The way I like to say it is, I have two interlocked professions where I'm familiar with being screwed by the system. So I have so there are those two things. So yeah, academic sharecropper, sure, exactly. So I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, where I was born. I grew up in Lakewood, the first suburb to the west. My wife and I moved down here for her work that she does in Charlotte. She fixes flutes. We have a dog named Pollock, and if you have any specific personal questions, I'm mostly during the campaign. I've been focusing on the issues rather than myself, because I really think that the best way to reach people and to talk with them is about issues that affect us all rather than my personal biography. But I do like talking about myself.
Well, let's do this. Let's segue into the issues, though. Sure. But you are still a candidate, and so
right.
Let's do it this way. David, share with the viewers how it is that you came to decide to run for Congress.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do the middle length version. So as a teacher, I've been working very hard over the past few years to find ways to teach my students better. And through that process of going from sort of rearranging the structure of the classes I was teaching to music majors at the school I teach at, to then creating a class for non-majors to talk about music, so that we were changing the content of the class so that it was focused on their interests. I let them choose our weekly topics that we discuss, so I have to spend a lot of time learning things I might not know anything about, or having them learn things. So trying to sort of apply a more democratic approach based on the phrase for it is critical pedagogy. This is Paulo Freire, like pedagogy of the oppressed, and bell hooks, teaching to transgress. And through that process, I had to become much more politically aware, as I was also learning how being an adjunct professor was just to be the people being screwed the most besides students in the academic system, or maybe the people on the staff level below, like janitors and stuff. But so trying to figure out why the system is designed the way it is, and then talking with students about how systems are designed and all these things. And that sort of, we could call it a political radicalization, if you like. That led me to, during this election that just passed, to supporting Bernie Sanders in the primary. And then after that was over, I voted for Jill because not going to deal with the other people. So that when this came around and we got Trump for president, our Mick Mulvaney, who is now the OMB director and saying awful things on television that just are embarrassing and are just disgusting, his seat came open, and I live in his district. So I wanted somebody to run on issues like Bernie and Jill did. So public college, or wiping away student loan debt. That's one of the things I'm talking about. And I looked around, and there were 7 Republicans who announced for the primaries. There were 3 Democrats. I was really focused on the one Democrat who is the one who is still in it, because he's a Goldman Sachs, ExxonMobil tax attorney. And, he put in $100,000 of his own money in the beginning. So guess where the Democrats went? To him.
So in other words, you had a slate of Republicans
right.
And a classic
corporate Democrat, absolutely. And so when I saw that he was running, I was like, I wanted someone to run a progressive campaign. And I realized that nobody else was going to do that. And when I was contacting people to figure out if anybody else was going to, the Democrats were going to run this corporate guy. And I was like, screw this. So I was talking to the Green Party people, and after meeting with the local guy who's now my campaign manager, Greg Jokoy, we decided to do this. And so we've been running a straight green campaign that's about, universal health care and free public college. And I'm also talking about affordable housing and ending prison slavery and, of course, getting money out of politics. So,
well, as a campaign manager myself, I know Greg Jokoy is going to be very pleased to see how adeptly you just mentioned the 5 issues that you're going to run on. Nicely done. So what we're going to do now is go one by one, and I'm going to ask you each one. And before we do that, I'm going to remind the viewers that the only reason that you're hearing a conversation like this is because you're tuned into the Green News Network. With a hat tip to Gil Scott-Heron, we know that the revolution will not be televised, but it will be brought to you over non-corporately sourced, non-corporately filtered opportunities for news, information, and analysis like the Green News Network, like Democracy in Action. So I'm going to invite the viewers, if you have any comments or questions, to please write them in the comments. Technical Director Michael O'Neill will feed them to us. The second thing I'm going to invite the viewers to do is to comment in the comment section. Share this video. Let folks know that we exist. We are up to, on average, somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 people who are participating on a weekly basis, and it's all because of you. So, David Kulma, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Let's go in. Let's talk about those 5 issues one by one. Issue 1, David Kulma for Congress is?
Well, when I do them in order, I'm talking about universal health care. The most important one that I'm talking about is ending prison slavery, but we'll do them in the order I usually talk about them in so that I can keep them straight in my head. The one thing I want to mention at this point that I want to make it very clear that we haven't said yet is that the election that I'm running in is tomorrow, June 20th. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that we're not talking about an election that's in November or in a year and a half. We're talking about tomorrow. So universal health care. So the line I usually say is we need Medicare for all, universal health care now. So we have a single payer system. There's a bill in Congress called H.R. 676 that's been put into Congress every year by John Conyers from Michigan, a Democrat. There are more than 100 co-sponsors. I think last time I checked it was 112. If we did this now, we would have no deductibles, no co-pays, no premiums. Everybody would get a Medicare card. It would cover all medically necessary services, including dental, emergency care, like a whole list of things that most people are paying extreme amount of money out of pocket. And so one of the things I say is that we need a system so that people are not having, people are talking about Obamacare and protecting or repealing it or whatever. The current system, even with Obamacare, that made it somewhat better, people are still using GoFundMe to have to pay their medical bills. The richest country on the face of the earth refuses to guarantee health care as a human right, and I'm talking about it as a human right. So, the amazing thing about this is if we cut health insurance companies out of the system, we can take all that profit they're making and all the money they're spending on paperwork that keeps people from getting care. They get profit from telling us that we don't deserve the care that we've paid for. That at least $400 billion a year, that's billion with a B, we can take that money and put it back into the system, and then that we can use that money to cover everybody who isn't covered right now, to make sure that we have a healthier society. So it's more people will be covered, everybody will be covered, and it'll be cost less and more efficient.
David, as you go through talking about healthcare as a human right, and earlier reminds me that you mentioned as a teacher helping your students think about systems and the educational system itself. It occurs to me that our healthcare system isn't broken, because it actually is doing what it's designed to do, which is to treat access to healthcare as a commodity to be bought and paid for as a profit. You're talking about, though, designing a system to do something else, which is shockingly to actually provide health care to sick and injured people.
Exactly, right. So our current system is designed to kill 45,000 people a year because they can't afford the commodity that is healthcare in our society. So we could end those unnecessary deaths immediately by instituting Medicare for all.
And I like that you are very disciplined about calling it Medicare for all, because most of us actually have either some familiarity with Medicare, either our parents or aunts or uncles, right, or maybe ourselves. We're familiar with it. And you know, one thing I've noticed, David, not a single person that I know, including many conservatives, ever reject that socialized medicine once they hit 65 in this.
Exactly, right.
They never do, right? It's a wildly popular system. So we've got a call for Medicare for all, or healthcare as a human right. What's issue number 2 for David Kulma?
So issue number 2 is public education is a public good, and we should fund it that way. So I've got 5 little pieces because I'm a teacher, so this is where I get a little elaborate. So the first is that we should only use, so to make sure that we guarantee education is a human right as well, that we want to make sure that public education funding only goes to public schools. That means no vouchers we give to parents and they use that money to go to help them pay for private school tuition. No charter schools that are set up by public through public funds. These are private institutions. So both of those are ways we give public money given by taxpayers to fund unaccountable private schools that can take profit off of the top and not use that money to go into some rich person's bank account, rather than use to educate children and give resources to teachers to make sure we have the best education system we can have. So, and plus, the current education system we have, those school choice things that I was describing that people laud as like, oh, choice. Well, what they're doing is they're allowing rich and middle-class white people to choose to desegregate our schools so that the lowest income and the poorest in our society, which is often people of color, are stuck in these schools that are losing and have less and less resources, rather than investing all of us investing into our public schools. Because people who have money, if they have children in public schools, they have leverage to demand AP classes. You know, they give money to help like music boosters and have arts in the schools. So when people who have income in our country invest in the public schools, and if we keep all the money there, all of the schools get better. There are a lot of other problems along the way, but this funding issue is fundamental to making sure that our public schools are the best we can make them. The other part is that we need to end standardized testing, because that system is designed to punish poorly performing schools by removing funding or firing all the teachers or throwing everybody out, rather than using resources on identifying schools that need help and then putting more resources in. We suck them out through standardized testing, and it also just destroys the education everyone gets, because the teachers have to end up teaching to the tests rather than teaching a student-focused curriculum and we empower teachers to do the best for their students rather than to punish them for doing poorly. So that's 2 parts of there. You wanted to jump in?
Well, yes, just because if you finish your education part, I do want to let you know that there's a couple of comments and questions I want to get to, but I don't want to interrupt.
So I can go through the college stuff faster. So it's 3 parts. One is making public colleges and universities free. The second is expanding bankruptcy law to include education loans. Many people don't know that if you take out a college loan, that you are not able to get out from under that if you can't pay it. So if you had got a loan to start a restaurant and your restaurant failed, you could declare bankruptcy, and that month your debt would go away. That education debt will stay with you until you die, and they will garnish your wages or even your Social Security if you're that old, if you're old enough for that. So we need to expand bankruptcy law. And then the thing that like Jill Stein has been talking about in the past year or two is wiping away and forgiving all student loan debt. And the line I say here is, Imagine what would happen if millions of people suddenly had $200 or more of their own money in their pocket each month. What would happen to the economy? So that's the education platform.
Fantastic. Look, I love it. I want to go into it, but I also want to acknowledge that Marcus wrote in with the comment. He says, our ACA actually went up $365 a month. We can't afford to pay that along with the thousands in bills that they still won't cover. Curtis asked a specific question of you, David Kulma. What
Sure.
do you think about a public option?
A public option. So I've been talking with the local president in the state of the Physicians for a National Health Program that Market Flowers is one of the lead people for. The guy in South Carolina, it's called Healthcare for All South Carolina. His name is Dr. David Keeley. And I asked him this question, and he told me that a public option, they basically, whenever they've done this before in other systems, what ends up happening is that mostly the people who end up in the public system are the ones who can't get the private system. So it ends up being a lot of people that are going to have lots of, who are going to need lots of care, and they're going to have lots of pre-existing conditions. And that means that the public option, people who are having the public option are going to have, not going to really get very good care, and they're going to have to still spend a lot of money for it. You're basically just another way of sequestering all of the sick people into one place rather than spreading everything around like Medicare for All would do. So
let's go into point or platform number 3 on the Kulma for Congress campaign.
Yeah, so it's we need sustainable, affordable housing for people making $20 an hour or less in this country. So we all know that housing prices are still going up again, right? We're headed for another bubble, and wages are still staying flat over the past 40 years. And so this problem is continuing. So that means that if you look at the National Low Income Housing Coalition website, they talk about how in the area of South Carolina, the 11 counties that I'm running for Congress for, that the minimum wage of $7.25 an hour in any place you live in this county, you cannot afford the average market rent. So that means that in the least one, it's like $7.50. You would need to be making $7.50, right? But it's for money. Other places, it's way more than that. So that means that people who make regular working people they are spending too much of their money on housing. And that means that, and the term is cost burdened, right? If they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing, and that includes utilities, it means that they're not being able to pay for food. It means that they're not paying their electric bill. It means that I know there's a woman I know and have met who literally shuts off her appliances at night and has to plan how often she uses her car because she has to decide whether or not it's worth using the gas. So what I'm advocating for is that we subsidize people who are spending more than 30% of their income on housing because there are not housing options for them right now that would actually allow them to be sustainable. And then we need to be building housing options that allow them to housing options that would actually be sustainable. So this would be like apartment homes or more apartments in areas and multifamily homes. And there's a guy in Rock Hill named Dale Dove who's specifically working on trying to get the city to build tiny homes for people along these lines, because it's actually illegal in our city for people to build a house that's smaller than 850 square feet. So building housing that would actually be affordable for current wages. By the way, I'm also for the fight for 15. We need to raise the minimum wage.
Fantastic. I love what I'm hearing, folks. You're watching the Green News Network, Democracy in Action. I'm your host, David Cobb. We're speaking with David Kulma, who is running for U.S. Congress in a special election that is happening tomorrow, if you're watching live, on Tuesday, June 20th. Before we get to your next one, let's just wrap. So what we've got now is a call for healthcare as a fundamental human right. We're talking about a systemic transformation of the education system in this country, and we're talking about basically access to housing and as a fundamental human right. Is that a fair way to catch those three? So we've got two more. I do want to let you know a couple of comments or questions are coming in. I want to catch those. Ian writes in to ask, what are the prospects for legalizing medical marijuana in South Carolina? What's your position there, especially since industrial hemp was just voted on and passed?
Exactly. Your Ian is exactly right. They just made industrial hemp legal. In terms of what's going on for the state legislature, I don't expect them to pass marijuana anytime soon. Most of the Republicans that were in the race, they were talking when that question got brought up in a debate, they're all like, it's a gateway drug, all that bull crap from the 80s and Nancy Reagan. So I personally am for decriminalizing all drugs in this country and shutting down the drug war. So I want us to be able to do for people who use medical marijuana or just even use it recreationally to be able to. That's something I advocate. We need to get it off of Schedule I and all these sorts of things. But in terms of the state legislature, I'm not expecting it to change anytime soon because it's a very Republican conservative place.
All right, fair enough. So let's catch your next big topic or your next issue that you are campaigning on, David Kulma, candidate for Congress.
Yes, so I'm calling for we need to end slavery in our prisons and repeal the exception clause from the 13th Amendment. A lot of people don't know that the 13th Amendment, which supposedly abolished slavery, has an exception clause that says that we can enslave prisoners. And guess what? That means that and we do and have been since 1865. So what we did is what actually happened is we took the chattel slavery model of a person owning people and we made it into the state owns people. And then guess what? The state can then lease those people out to corporations. And so we make money literally locking people in cages. We make money by locking people in cages for all these rich people and large corporations like Geo Group. And then we then work them for free or third world wages in order to make more money for all those people. And then we actually, so for example, like the system is gargantuan and crazy, and we need to stop it immediately. But the one anecdote I can give is that in Arizona, there are 2 private prisons that they make let me phrase this perfectly here, that there are contracts with the state that say that they have to keep their beds 100% full. So at a time when crime rates are going down, but you have to keep a prison 100% full, what do? You criminalize normal human behavior. So that means that, like the drug war and various other reasons, we purposefully put people in prison to make it so that rich people can make shit tons of money. So I'm calling for an end to this. What I'm calling for is that one of the first things I'll do when I'm in Congress is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call for congressional hearings into the 13th Amendment and how it enables slavery to this day. And then, because we need to release a lot of people, because the Brennan Center for Justice had put out a study in December that says that we can release 39% of our prisoners today because they pose no compelling public safety risk. 39%. That's like 1 million people that we could let out today.
Actually, as a lawyer, confirm that Green Party congressional candidate David Kulma is absolutely correct. The 13th Amendment literally creates an exception clause for slave labor. It is, in fact, being used. It also is worth pointing out that the United States of America incarcerates and imprisons a higher percentage of its population than any industrialized country in the United States of America. David, before we go to the next one, I do want to let you know we are getting a lot of comments and questions and concerns, skepticism, if you will, about the state of voting integrity in South Carolina. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So from what my campaign manager, Greg, says about South Carolina voter integrity is that, yes, there is the problem of using the electronic voting machines, which of course means that we can't necessarily audit the vote. But at the same time, there are election laws that are better than some other states that help us actually do some things to make sure that it's not like utterly stolen, as we might say. So I need to know more about that personally. I haven't had time to look at it, but I can talk to Greg more about the specifics of South Carolina. But he tells me that there are some good things about South Carolina election law, but
So we got a lot more comments and questions coming in, but I want to give you a chance that your fifth point is.
Sure. Getting money out of politics. So we need a constitutional amendment that says that corporations are not people and that money isn't speech. And then also, in addition to that, we need to make sure we have citizen-owned, publicly financed elections so that we actually have people who represent us rather than who the Democrat and the Republican are in this race, who is a wealthy land developer is the Republican, and the Democrat was a corporate lawyer for both Goldman Sachs and ExxonMobil.
So, David, that's your 5-point plan. We're going to catch a couple of comments and questions while we can. Brian writes in to ask, hey, wait a minute. Hasn't rent control proven itself a disastrous policy in the past?
Rent control, well, I'm kind of along with that. I don't remember his name. The guy who's in New York City. The rent is too damn high party. So, rent control is a means by which we can. There are many methods we can use to modify how we handle housing, and the idea that our system is completely designed around whether or not rich people want to live in or near something as the method by which we decide how to handle housing in this country and shelter strikes me as ludicrous. So we need to change a lot about this system, but I'm advocating specific things that would help people today if we did.
Ellen writes in to say, many cities need more and better public transportation. What are your thoughts or plans there?
Well, absolutely, I agree. In terms of building infrastructure, well, the thing I've been talking about in terms of infrastructure things is that we need sort of like the Green New Deal that Dr. Stein was talking about. But to my mind, it's a World War II style investment that would include talking about energy and infrastructure and changing the way that, by totally reshaping our economy around renewable energy and efficiency and sustainability rather than all of this economic growth that's going to kill the planet. We can actually create jobs and build things like public transportation that means that we all are doing infill as opposed to suburban sprawl and all of these things to make sure that we're building sustainable communities that will actually be here in 200 years rather than underwater like Charleston, South Carolina might be.
So, David, you are literally talking about a transition away from the corporatized capitalist economy and how we've structured our society onto a sustainable human rights kind of policy. And so I love what I'm hearing as a candidate. I have a challenge to you. What are you going to do if you don't get elected to Congress? Are you going to stay involved in the Green Party? Have you given any thought about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that Greg and I are working on is that Greg is from the Upstate Green Party in South Carolina, which is centered around Greenville. And there really isn't a chapter in the area, in the district that I'm running for. So we're working to find ways to build green chapters in York and Chester counties, which are the two closest. Well, there's one closest to Charlotte and then the one underneath it that we have campaign offices in right now. So that's likely to be one of the things that we're going to work on later, is finding ways to make green parties that actually address local issues at the local level and can solve problems that most people are ignoring in these areas.
So, David Kulma, I want to make sure to let folks know that you and Greg Jokoy are both attending a movement school for revolutionaries in South Carolina. And I want to let folks know that you too can go to that one by contacting David Kulma's campaign manager. Greg Jokoy has an instrumental role in having that to happen. So let's get your website one more time out there, David.
Sure. It's a votekulma.org, and you can go there to learn more. I've made videos, and so I've talked about each of those things, except for the money and politics, at length, so you can learn more about what I have to say about them.
David Kulma, the time has just flown by. Thank you so much for running for office. Thank you for your time talking to us now. I'm going to give you an opportunity to wrap up this conversation.
Sure. So if you are a Green Party member in the area of South Carolina or someone watching in SC District 5, please vote for me tomorrow, June 20. If you are someone outside of that, please share this video or share the campaign with anybody you know. If you know somebody in South Carolina, call them today and tell them to vote for me, please. David Kulma, it's Kulma, Green Party candidate for U.S. House SC District 5. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, folks. You've been watching Democracy in Action on the Green News Network. I'm your host, David Cobb. Our guest was David Kulma. He is running for the United States Congress in a special election in South Carolina on the Green Party ticket. Remember, folks, the Green Party is getting larger, stronger, and better organized every day. We need your active involvement and participation to make this planet the peaceful, just, democratic, and ecologically sustainable place that we so desperately need and so richly deserve. I want to thank Mel Figueroa, the executive director of the Green News Network, technical director Michael O'Neill for his work day in and day out on this. Peace.